Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, today we're not just opening a book, we are really jumping straight into a critical review of, well, one of the most famous novels ever written. Our mission, same as always, we want to pull out the most important bits of insight, maybe some surprising angles, those moments that really click and turn information into something you actually understand. Cutting through the noise. Okay, let's unpack this. So, the focus for this deep dive is Harper Lee's incredible novel, To Kill a Mockingbird. We're looking at a pretty comprehensive review here, and it's not just a plot summary, it really gets into why this book still has so much power. We want to help you get a handle on the key arguments, the main ideas from this specific source, this review, so you get the full picture without having to wade through everything yourself.
Yeah, and this review is, well, it's fascinating because it's not just praising the book blindly. It gives you this critical perspective on why it lasts, how it
Yeah.
examines human behavior so deeply. It really boils down why this novel still hits home decades later. So we'll be looking at how the review talks about the setting, the main characters, the big themes, all through the lens of this particular analysis.
And what I find really captivating is how this review talks about the book inspiring us even now, about fairness, empathy, and just the courage it takes to stand up for what's right. It's not just saying it's great, it's breaking down why it inspires.
Yeah.
So for you listening, the question to keep in mind as we go is what really jumps out at you from this review's take on a classic? Let's start right at the beginning. How does this review set the scene, the novel's setting?
Okay, so the source puts us squarely in the setting, the American South in the 1930s, specifically this fictional town, Macomb, Alabama. And right away, the review says, look, this isn't just some quaint background scenery. It's almost like another character in the story, and kind of a suffocating one at that. It really paints this picture of a community dealing with the Great Depression, poverty, things feeling stuck, and racial segregation just woven into the fabric of life. Not just the law, but how people lived day to day. The review argues that Macomb's small-town feel, its resistance to anything new, actually makes it the perfect pressure cooker for everything that happens later. It suggests Lee built Macomb deliberately as this sort of microcosm, reflecting the wider South, maybe even the whole country's attitudes and prejudices back then.
That's a really interesting point, not just a backdrop, but an active character. So
Yeah.
the review thinks Makeham's sleepy, slow vibe actually ramps up the tension.
Exactly. It suggests that the context, the economic hardship of the Depression, and the rigid social structure, it all makes the racial prejudice even worse, even more entrenched. It describes Macomb as one of those places where everybody knows everybody, but paradoxically that makes it even harder to challenge things, to question the way things are. The review points out how the tough economic times probably fueled this fear of outsiders, this instinct to protect traditions, even if those traditions were, well, morally wrong. It basically says Lee used that period to show how economic stress can make communities more anxious, more likely to find scapegoats, and keep unfair systems going, especially against black people.
Oh.
The setting almost feels like it was designed to create the conflict Atticus faces.
Hmm. And within this really carefully drawn setting, we meet these characters who become almost legendary, right? Tied so closely to the book's meaning. The review focuses on three main ones. Can you walk us through them? Maybe how the review sees their importance beyond just their role in the plot?
Absolutely. So the review spends a good amount of time on Scout Finch, who tells the story. It doesn't just see her as this innocent kid. It frames her as like a moral compass that's developing, guiding the reader along the way. The argument is that her curiosity, her sort of initial lack of understanding, it serves this really important purpose. It lets Lee show us how complex and, frankly, absurd adult prejudice is, but through this clear, unfiltered view. The review suggests Scout's journey, her losing some of that innocence, isn't just her story. It's a powerful way for us, the readers, to face up to these societal problems, too. It mentions times when Scout asks these really simple, direct questions that just cut right through the grown-up hypocrisy around her. It forces them and us to look at uncomfortable truths.
Yeah, that makes sense. Using a child's perspective like that.
Then you've got Atticus Finch, her father. The review positions him as way more than just the town lawyer. He's presented as the absolute embodiment of moral principle, of this quiet, steady courage. It really digs into how Atticus doesn't just talk about doing the right thing, he actually does it even when everyone in town turns against him, isolates him. The review calls him the conscience of Macomb, which is powerful. But it also recognizes the real human cost of his choices. It's just Atticus represents what the review calls practical empathy. Empathy that leads to action, not just feeling sorry for someone.
Practical empathy. I like that. And the third figure.
And finally, Tom Robinson. The review really stresses his symbolic importance. He's not just the man falsely accused, he's the ultimate mockingbird of the title. He's described as this genuinely innocent person whose life is destroyed by the town's prejudice. And his destruction really exposes just how deep the moral rot goes in Maycomb. The review notes how Tom's dignity, his quiet suffering, even when the odds are completely stacked against him, it just throws the terrible injustice and the dehumanizing effect of racism into sharp relief. His story, as the review sees it, is right at the heart of the novel's condemnation of racial bigotry.
Wow. So the review really sees these characters as tools almost that Lee uses very deliberately. Scout as the moral barometer, Atticus as empathy in action, Tom as the symbolic victim. Okay, so moving from these key people, the review jumps straight into the novel's primary themes. And these aren't just like background ideas, are they? The review says they're the absolute core of the story.
Not at all, no. The review is clear. The novel's lasting power comes from how directly it confronts themes like racism, injustice, and that difficult transition, the loss of innocence. What's really sharp is how the review argues Lee weaves these themes together so tightly. It points out that racism isn't only the obvious, loud kind of hatred, it's also the quieter, systemic prejudice, the sort of polite bigotry that props up Maycomb society. You see it everywhere, from the courts to the playground. So the injustice isn't just about Tom Robinson's trial, though that's central. It's about this general lack of fairness that permeates the whole community, this built-in inequality based on race.
And the loss of innocence theme, it's more than just Scout and Jem growing up, according to the review.
It's exactly right. The review argues that this loss of innocence goes beyond the Finch children. It's a commentary on the whole community, maybe losing its own naive belief that things are inherently fair. Or maybe it's about exposing an innocence that was never really there in the first place. It says that through the kids' eyes, we readers are forced to see the harsh realities of a very flawed world. We experience this kind of collective disillusionment as the sort of respectable mask of Maycomb gets pulled away. The review even suggests this theme pushes us, the reader, to question our own ideas about justice and right and wrong, making the book a really transformative read.
That is such a clever narrative strategy, isn't it? Having a child expose these deep-seated prejudices, it really does amplify the ugliness when you see it through their simple, honest questions. So the review stresses the book's enduring relevance. With these heavy themes, racism, injustice, what exactly does the review say makes it still resonate so powerfully today? Well, connecting it to the bigger picture, the review really emphasizes that its relevance comes from its strong but also complex message against racial discrimination and injustice. And sadly, that message is still incredibly pertinent today. It argues it's not just a history lesson about the Jim Crow South. It's a timeless look at prejudice itself, the dangers of groupthink and the bravery it takes to go against the grain. The review highlights how prejudice and the fight for equality are universal human struggles, and that's why the novel keeps speaking to new generations. It suggests the book gives us a way, maybe even a language, to talk about really difficult subjects society is unfortunately still wrestling with.
And a huge part of that power, the review points out, is Atticus Finch. His character truly embodies moral courage. How does the review analyze him as being so central to the book's message about doing what's right? The review really holds Atticus up as the definition of integrity in action. It's careful not to make him seem like some perfect saint, but rather a man who makes incredibly hard, unpopular choices because he's deeply committed to justice and, well, human dignity. The source highlights how he stands firm against huge community pressure, against insults, even threats. It emphasizes him taking Tom Robinson's case knowing he'll probably lose in court, but understanding that his moral duty to give a proper defense comes first. The review specifically mentions his commitment to empathy, trying to understand even the people who hate him as a key part of his character. It's portrayal that really pushes you to think about your own moral strength, how you might act when your beliefs are seriously challenged. The review basically says Atticus isn't just a character. He's like a moral compass for the reader, challenging us all to think about what principled action really means.
Interesting. It's not only about racial injustice, though obviously that's huge. The review also talks about the novel's profound examination of human behavior more broadly. Beyond those big themes, what other aspects of human nature does it explore?
Yeah, this is where the review gets really nuanced. It argues Lee digs into the incredible complexity and, frankly, the contradictions within people, the potential for both amazing good and terrible cruelty, often in the same town, sometimes even in the same person. It explores things like fear of the unknown, the comfort people find in just going along with the crowd, and the subtle ways prejudice can show up not just as open hate, but as simple ignorance, or maybe just not caring. The review mentions characters like Mrs. DeBose, who shows a strange kind of courage despite her racism, or Boo Radley, who's feared but turns out to be heroic in his own way. It pushes the reader, as the review phrases it, to look past the surface and try to understand the complicated reasons behind people's actions. It urges us to be more critical but also more empathetic when looking at our neighbors and maybe even ourselves. The review makes a strong case that Mockingbird is fundamentally a study in the gray areas of human morality.
Okay, so we have this deep look at human behavior, the good, the bad, the complicated bits, and it all seems to lead to what the review sees as the novel's ultimate point. It's timeless inspiration about fairness, empathy, and standing up for what's right. That feels like a major takeaway, especially now.
Absolutely. The review finishes by stressing that To Kill a Mockingbird isn't just history. It isn't just a coming-of-age tale. It's presented as this living example of the power of individual conscience and really a call to action. It inspires us to actively push for fairness, to genuinely try to understand people who are different, and to find the courage, like Atticus did, to fight injustice no matter how tough the fight seems or how powerful the opposition is. The review suggests Lee's genius was making these huge moral lessons feel incredibly personal and relatable by showing them through a child's eyes. It's a message that doesn't really get old because that human struggle for justice and understanding, that's universal.
And that, as the review wraps up so effectively, is what makes To Kill a Mockingbird more than just a great book. It makes it an enduring classic, something that keeps challenging and inspiring people generation after generation to think about their own part in making the world a bit more just, a bit more empathetic. It reminds us that even when things look bleak, one person's integrity can still make a real difference. Okay, so let's quickly pull together the key things we've unpacked in this deep dive into the review of Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. We started with that powerful setting, the 1930s South, Macomb, which the review presented almost as a character itself, shaping the whole conflict. Then we looked at the main figures, Scout Finch, seen by the review as our developing moral guide, Atticus Finch, framed as this icon of practical empathy and quiet courage, and Tom Robinson, the symbolic mockingbird whose fate exposes the town's deep-seated injustice. We explored those core themes: racism, injustice, the loss of innocence, and how the review emphasized Lee's brilliant use of Scout's viewpoint to shine a light on these huge societal issues and make us, the readers, question things. The review really hammered home the book's lasting message against discrimination, especially through Atticus and his moral strength.
Right. And if we pull back to the bigger picture, this review truly highlights the novel's deep dive into human behavior itself and its timeless call for fairness, empathy, and, well, doing the right thing. Which brings up a really important question for you, listening now. Thinking about these timeless themes, as this review lays them out, how do they connect to things you see happening around you today? Where do you maybe see echoes of Macomb's struggles in our own world?
Yeah, so what does this all really mean for you? After this deep dive, hearing about this review's analysis of To Kill a Mockingbird, how might its picture of moral courage, of fighting injustice, resonate with your own thoughts about standing up for what's right, especially when it feels hard or when the odds seem stacked against you? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.